Good afternoon. It's been a while. Here I am again with another video to liberate your mind or help you to liberate your own mind. So I don't do videos just for the sake of doing videos. I usually wait for some kind of inspiration or just through noticing a trend that might be happening in the kind of clients that I see. And there's definitely a trend happening, and I want to share that with you now. And this isn't just because of the people I work with. I work with a lot of people from all different ages, but it's also because I train other therapists and I supervise therapists, hypnotherapists specifically. And so I get to hear about their cases. So I get kind of a wide range of a flavor of what's going on and what the general trends are of the kind of problems that people are coming to see their therapist for. And something I've noticed that's kind of becoming even more prevalent, it's been starting to happen over the last 18 months, but actually it's starting to kind of reach a climactic point in a way. And that is, there's a bit of a revolution going on. And when I say revolution, I'm not talking about like the politics and all the rest of that stuff. That's not really what I want to talk about here. This is talking about kind of revolutionary, like a revolution within relationships, right? Romantic relationships, marriages, those kinds of things. So what do I mean by that? Well, basically, there's a lot of breakups going on, right? A lot of breakups. And if they're not breaking up yet, they're planning their breakups from within the marriage or the relationship. And it seems to be more women leaving the family unit or the male. And I started to ask myself, what's the reason for this? What's going on here? Why is it so prevalent? Why is there so many? And I know lots of people myself that are either going through divorces, going through breakups, or again, thinking about that. So I kind of really thought about this, and it started to occur to me that the reason is, it's the state of the world, right, is the catalyst, in the sense that because of the lockdown, because of the heightened kind of stress and the conditions that people are finding themselves in when they are really starting to evaluate what is important, what matters, you know, making the most of the time they have here, right? When sort of there's a lot of death and stuff going on, it starts to make you question, you know, your humanity, your, you know, mortality. So what's happening is a lot of people are starting to say enough is enough. And that might be because they're in a relationship where the other person is just doing their own thing. They're not trying anymore. They are, and I'll tell you the main reason is as well, is that women are a lot more ready to do the work on themselves, right? They're ready to go to therapy. They're ready to go to coaching. They like to read self-help books. They are more spiritual in a lot of ways. Like whenever I go to workshops, like even in the industry I'm in, right? When you kind of go to coaching things or therapy things, it's always women and then a few guys, right? Which is great for someone like me because it means it's very easy to kind of stand out from the crowd. But you know, that's not to say that women are better at it or men are better at it. It's just the way it seems to be. Women are more awake. They're more ready to start to look at themselves and to start to make those improvements. So what tends to be happening now is through lockdown, all of these people, and some men too, but mainly women. I mean, I would say I probably see more women than I do men in terms of clients, just because it just seems to work out like that. But what's going on here is people have had that time to introspect, right? They've gone inwards, they've looked at their life, they've evaluated their circumstances, whether it be the relationship, their kind of job, and a lot of things. It's not just relationships that are happening. It's also people are leaving their jobs. They're coming out of the city. They're starting to get their priorities right. They want to have more quality time with their children, those kinds of things. But the main thing I want to talk about here is the relationships. Because again, why is this happening? Well, women have made their decisions. They're now putting their plans into action. And basically, men are just not getting on board, right? They don't want to talk about their problems and they don't want to look at themselves, take responsibility for what's going on for them. They usually do one of two things, right? They will either dig their head in the sand and they will kind of like, they won't even listen to the words. They will literally, it'll go in one ear and out the other, and it's just all like, she's off again, or she's just giving it all this again. And it's kind of an issue, because what they don't realize is that the landscape has changed, right? So either they will dig their head in the sand and they will just kind of be oblivious to it, or just kind of write it off as just, oh, they're nagging again, or whatever it is, or they'll project, right? They will get defensive and they will say, they will, instead of kind of like listening and acknowledging, they will start to put it back on the other person and say, well, you're doing this and you're doing this. And it's kind of missing the point. So what's the knock-on effect of that? Well, eventually the ladies are saying, well, I've kind of done all I can. So when someone comes to me and they're in a session, I'm not kind of saying, right, we should get out of that relationship. I never tell anybody to do anything. What I will do to start with, actually, is I will try and reframe it. I will try and put them in the other person's shoes. And I will say, because a lot of like men and women, they communicate differently, right? They certainly handle stress differently. Whereas women like to talk. That's how they kind of deal with it. They process things. They like to meet other women or men and they talk it through, usually women. And what they say, a problem shared is a problem solved. And they like that. That's how they kind of process. Whereas men are the complete opposite. They want to go into their cave and they just want to think about nothing, actually. That's why they'll sit in front of the TV, or they'll go on a golf course, or they'll sit there fishing and watch and they literally just want nothingness. They want to literally allow all of that stress to just work itself out, because they solve their problems once they're back in the driving seat and they've de-stressed. Whereas women actually use the conversation to do that de-stressing and to get things sorted in their own minds. Whereas women like to ask for help and they like to share that problem. A man actually has been conditioned, especially of a certain age, that actually asking for help is a weakness. Talking about your problems is a weakness. Talking about emotions or feeling those emotions is a weakness. Now, thankfully, I work with a lot of teenagers, and I would say teenagers sort of like 20s and below now, they're very different, right? So in colleges and schools and stuff, they seem to be very now aware that it's okay to feel this way and it's okay to talk about it and to get help, and it's not a weakness, it's a very normal thing. So that's the good news. It is kind of starting to change in that way. But for the men of a certain age, like 30s and above, they really are just, they're trying to do what they've always done. And I'm telling you, it's not going to work anymore, because back in the day when you got married, it was kind of like for better or worse, and people will stay together. And actually, I would say about 70% of the cases, the only reason the woman hasn't left yet is because of the children, because of the impact this is going to have on the kids. And therefore, they're hesitating, or they're taking their time to plan it properly. But on the flip side of that, I would say that some ladies they need to understand again about this communication thing. Whereas with a guy, you've got to be direct, right? Whereas a lot of women, they try and leave subtle hints, or they kind of imply, or they'll even assume or expect a guy to think the way they do, and they just don't. So they are constantly let down again and again, and they will say something like, I've left all these hints, there's no way he can get this wrong, and he makes a mistake every single time. And what the guy is just like, it's just like a minefield for the guy, right? He just wants you to say, this is what I want, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I need, and you'll never be disappointed again, because most of the time, guys want you to be happy. They just don't know how to do it, right? So if you tell them what you need and what's required, and you're saying, well, I shouldn't have to do that. Well, I'm telling you that essentially you're gonna get the best out of a guy if you understand how he thinks, how he works, and you just tell him what you need. Okay? So I'm not preaching to either side. I'm not biased in any way. All I'm saying is, and I do encourage people, I say, look, before you make this big decision, before you kind of give up on this, just kind of think about, this is how best to communicate. This is the way he works. This is what needs to happen. And if you try all of those things, at that point, you're getting nothing but resistance, you're getting denial, you're getting projection and all of that, at which point you've done all you can. So you can certainly walk away with your head held high saying that you couldn't have done any more. But my message really from this session is for the men. It's like, really, it's time for you to kind of break those old kind of conditioning patterns and start to think, right, if this isn't working, if my wife is actually starting to say these things to me, instead of just ignoring it or hoping it will go away. And that's the other thing guys do. They tend to just want to say the right thing in the moment. They're not really thinking about, you keep having the same argument again and again because you're not taking it in. You're not really taking on board what the message is. It's just like, what do you want me to say in the moment so we can then get back to calmness, because they've got stressful jobs and all the rest of it. And that's just not going to cut it anymore. So it's time for us to kind of like man up a little bit. And it's a different kind of manning up. It's about saying, okay, I need to take responsibility within this relationship. And it's not that the other person's trying to nag or get at you or trying to change you into something that you're not. It's about saying this takes two people. And what's happening is the women are growing, the women are healing, the women are expanding. They're kind of getting to a point where they're now ready to have a certain kind of relationship or a certain kind of life. And the men are just staying exactly where they are, and they're just growing apart. And it just gets to the stage where the women are saying, I can't work with this. This doesn't resonate with me. It's not going to work. And yes, the children may hold you together for a certain amount of time, but the more and more that they're speaking to each other, the ladies, and they're realizing, and there's a lot of them, that actually they wish they'd done it sooner, they've moved into their own place, and the guy's still going to have to commit to that in terms of like supporting the children and all the rest of it. And a lot of the guys, especially the kind of older generation ones, they're lost without the woman, because the woman used to do everything for them. And suddenly they're like, what happened? Right? So if you don't want that to happen to you, then maybe it's time to start to look at this honestly and sit down and not avoid that conversation and actually listen, not get defensive, maybe come and see somebody to like talk it out. And here's the other thing, you don't necessarily, it's not like the olden days, when you used to kind of, talk about your feelings and all the rest of it. Yes, you can go to that kind of a therapist, but you could go to an NLP practitioner, a CBT, hypnotherapist, those kinds of people where we can do it content free, right? I will have a guy sat on the couch who doesn't want to talk about it, and I will say, that's fine. You don't have to talk about it, right? All I need to know is when that situation is happening, what's going on in your body? And they will say, well, I get this feeling here, or I feel like that, or this thought comes to me and all the rest of it. And I say, and we'll work through it and we'll do that. And then afterwards, I'll say, now check it again. That's completely different. It is, isn't it? And what does that now mean? Well, it means I can do this, I can do this. And I still don't know what happened to them. I still don't know the situation. I don't need the content. So for a guy that doesn't want to talk about it or kind of get personal or all the rest of it, you can still sort out your stuff without going into the detail and kind of getting over personal, right? So my message is both sexes have to step up and start to work on themselves, but especially the guys, because they are getting left behind. Those days are over. You can go to a therapist and you don't need to talk about it, but you can still heal yourself, and then you can make that marriage work. Because a lot of them, again, they don't want to lose their wife. They just don't know what to do with it, but they're not facing up to it. They're just doing what they always do, which is ignore it or numb it or remove themselves or avoid it. And eventually what happens is they wake up one day and they go, what happened? I've lost her. The kids are gone. Something to think about. Anyway, hope that was helpful. Have a good weekend.